So looking at application of functions, where we have word problems, and we're asked to interpret the word problems and use function notation within those word problems. Number one, we have the U.S. market share in percent of a certain truck is modeled by the function f of t equals negative 1.21t plus 29.21, where t is the number of years since 2010. So sketch a graph of this situation. So sketching a graph, notice I don't give you a grid to do a scatter plot or anything like that. So this is meant to be like a 30-second graph and you're done. So notice that t is the year since 2010. F of t is going to represent the percentage. So we only need positive years since 2010. So that goes across the bottom. And only positive values for f of t. So we'll label the axes. And we don't need to get too creative here. We just know that 0 years since 2010, that's our starting point, or our starting value. And what was the percentage, 0 years since 2010? If you put 0 in for t, we get 29.21. And then what's going to happen from there, that negative 1.21 represents our slope. So we should be recognizing y equals mx plus b form. So that negative 1.21 is our rate of change, or slope. So from 29.21, we're going to decrease by 1.21% every year. So we're going to start up higher because we know we have a decreasing line, so it's going to fall. So it looks something like that. 29.21, that'll be the value up here. And we know the slope is negative, so our line decreases. That's all we need to do for a sketch of the graph. It just gives us an idea of what's happening with the variables. So as time goes on, the market share of that truck decreases. Okay, what is the slope? Well, the slope of our line, we already mentioned, is m is negative 1.21. So think about what that's telling us. The y value, which is the market share in percent. Okay, so that market share is decreasing by 1.21% every year. So that's how you determine the slope and explain its meaning. C and D, now we're using function notation. So f of 10, remember that means with our function being f of t, that means they're giving us a t value of 10. So you're going to place 10 in for the t value in our equation. And then in part D, f of t equals 10. Well, now we're saying that like y equals 10. So now instead of saying the t value is 10, which represents 10 years since 2010, we're saying the y value, or the output, is 10. Remember, the output is the market share in percent. So now we're saying that when is in what year, so what t value will give you 10% market share. In part C, they told you the t value was 10, so you need to find what the market share is in the year 2020. So that's the difference in those two equations. So you solve each of those and pause the video and do that. So in part C, you get f of 10 equals 17.11, which means in 2020, we predict the market share to be 17.11%. And then in part D, we started with 10% and we solved for a t value of 15.9. So there we can round that up to 2026. I would actually accept an answer of 2025 or 2026. We're not going to quibble too much about what the decimal is telling us in this class. So if you said 2025 or 2026, I would accept that in those years. we would predict the market share to be 10%. And then the last part here for this question, solve f of t equals 0. So there what we're saying is, find the t value when you get 0 for an answer. So what that's asking you to find, after how many years will the market share be 0? So the market share is 0 on our graph down here. The point up here is when we started our time, which was 2010. But when the market share is 0, we're down here. So to solve that equation, you set your equation equal to 0, and then solve it, and you end up with right around 24.1. So we predict the market share to reach 0% in the year 2034. Okay, the second question is similar to the first one, just kind of practice. And you can pause the video and try that, and I'll just put the answer up just for saving time. So go through and solve this. I will mention, notice that we have y equals mx plus b form again. So that'll help with explaining the meaning of the numbers in part B. So you want to sketch a graph, explain the meaning of the numbers, and then answer the rest. Okay, so sketching a graph. Here we start at 11,000 and increase by 4.85 thousand subscribers per year. So we have an increasing graph. So that's why I started lower on this one, because I knew we had a positive slope. And then to explain the numbers, 4.85, that's your slope, which tells you the number of subscribers increases by 4.85 thousand per year. You can also write this as 4,850 per year. Just don't include the thousand as a word there. So either writing it this way or this way is okay. And then in 2000, there were 11,000 subscribers. So that's what the 11 is telling us, is that when we started in 2000, there were 11,000 subscribers. And then using function notation, which is the real point of this video, using function notation with the word problems. S of 20, remember our function was S of t. So now t is 20. So that means 20 years since 2000. So in the year 2020, what is our number of subscribers? That's what we're finding there. And then S of t equals 25. What is the t value? So how many years since 2000 do we end up with 25,000 subscribers? So you go through and finish that. And that's what we get. So in the year 2020, we predict 108,000 subscribers. And then we predict 25,000 subscribers in the year 2003. And again, when you solve for the t value, much of the time you will get decimals for answers. And again, how you round that is not something we're going to be too picky about in here. I would just say round it to the nearest whole number. So right around 3 years since 2000. So I said 2003. If you said during the year 2002, then that's fine also. So that's how you use function notation in word problems.